Okay, so now we are doing Scorpio Svamsa. The Atmakaraka falling in Scorpio Navamsa gives one a Scorpio Svamsa, or it sometimes is called the karakamsa, but the original word was the Svamsa. Okay, so this one is a really interesting one. The sutra Jaimini gives for Scorpio is very, very fascinating. I'll pull it up here. It reads Atra Jala Sari Sripaha Stanya Hanishcha. And this means essentially at Scorpio, demons, water, serpents / Vishnu, and deprivation of that which is contained in the breast or mother's milk. So let's break down this sutra. Now, Atra means like a demon or a devourer. So right away, Scorpio, is the sign of our demons or our psychological issues, but it is also the sign of like demons in a more material sense too. And Atra is when it's numerically manipulated in the same way we've been doing all these. Atra comes out to mean the number 8, which is why it's referring to Scorpio. Because remember, Jaimini never mentions the names of Rashis like Scorpio, Aries, this or that. And it may be because he was basically trolling people at that time because Indians were using the Greek names and Greek symbols. And he may have been subtly trolling his Vedic community to get back to the more numerological, like mathematically completely sound system that they were probably doing a little bit before the Greeks came in. So again, that's why he doesn't use like the ram for Aries, you know what I mean, or whatever. He uses a word that you then manipulate and it becomes a number of the Rashi. And it just happens to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that you get this number all through all 12 of them. So this is the secret code of Jaimini, and this is again why most people interpret Jaimini wrong. But anyways, going forward, Atra, Jala. So you have Atra, you have demons. It is the sign of demons, and then Jala, which is water or frigidity. So the same word that was used for Cancer Svamsa, if you remember. Jala, meaning water, but also meaning frigidity. So both Cancer and Scorpio have the tendency to freeze up. Basically emotionally freezing up or pulling within or withdrawing due to an emotional issue of some kind or a feeling-based, being very sensitive, basically. Scorpio, Cancer, and Pisces are the most sensitive signs. They are the Brahman signs, and Scorpio and Cancer are described as being many-footed by Parashara, like not biped or quadruped, but many-footed, so clinging onto things and like very, very just clingy and needy and sensitive kind of. And so, everything we said about Cancer Swamsha and the Jala, the water quality, is also true of Scorpio, and the frigidity of the mind, mental frigidity or physical frigidity or things like that. And then the word Sari Shripaha, which is a really cool word, which basically means a snake or a serpent or any creeping animals. So, but then it also means a name for Vishnu. So it's this beautiful pun where it's like, it's kind of saying like, this is the Swamsha of turning your serpents into Vishnu, like turning your, like basically transformation. It's hinting at it this as the Swamsha of the greatest spiritual transformations. And again, the water Rashis are the ones with the greatest spiritual potential, is the Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces Swamsha. So more on that later. There was something else I was going to say and I just forgot it. But then there's water, serpents, or Vishnu, a word which means both. And again, it's implying like turning your demons into God, like seeing God in everything, like seeing Vishnu in the demons and in the serpents and in everything, not just the pretty, lovely things, but the yucky things too. And then also it's very cool because Sarishripaha can mean any reptiles or snakes and creeping animals. And that's the thing, is that this is possibly the oldest sutra we have on Vedic astrology, on Rashis. If not, it's Yavana Jataka, but this might be the oldest one. And it's describing Scorpio as not the sign of scorpions, but the sign of serpents. So we really need to think on that and digest that. Like when you see serpents, you're seeing Scorpio. A lot of times we might immediately think of Aslesha or something else as Vedic astrologers, but Scorpio is the serpent Rashi. And as I look out, I'm seeing a little tiny lizard, a little naga, a little baby lizard, confirming that. But yeah, even reptiles, even little lizards and things like that can loosely fall under Scorpio. And then you have this last word, which is very cool. It's stanya hanishcha, which stanya means that which is contained in the breast. So breast milk, mother's milk. And then hanishcha, han is this word of striking or cutting. Hani means like abandoning, laying aside, losing it, being deprived of it, a lack of it, it not even existing, like whatever, just a loss of it. So it's basically the star of lack of breast milk, or lack of that which is contained in the breast. So basically lack of nourishment, you know what I mean? Like lack of the mother's milk or the mother's nourishment. And yeah, if you contemplate this sutra, you will just get so many cool connections to Scorpio. And it really is a star in a literal sense of like being deprived of breast milk. When babies that are born that don't get to get breastfed or are deprived of that, or the mother runs out. I've predicted this so many times ever since knowing this Swamsha or the sutra. You know, like I'm thinking of this one client years ago who it was like, yeah, like I was emphasizing that so much to him. He was like, that is crazy, because of all the kids, he was born from a bunch of kids, and he was the one where the mother ran out of breast milk, and like he could not get enough milk, enough nourishment, and he literally didn't grow as much as all of his brothers, and they said that that was why. And this is the other thing, is that Scorpio is the sign of being short and slender, actually, according to Parashara. So it's like people that are in the Scorpio realm of life are under so much more stress, and by whatever, the demons of life, everything, the lack of breast milk, they're not getting nurtured enough, and so they literally end up being shorter. Or like there was this younger kid I knew who was a really amazing skater, and he had such a rough childhood growing up in like trailer parks and horrible scenarios. He had a lot of Scorpio stuff. I never knew his birth time, but I just knew he had his sun in Scorpio and as the Atmakaraka. So he had this, and he was literally told by his doctor the reason he didn't grow taller was he was under so much stress his body couldn't produce hormones to make him grow. And so this is the kind of, yeah, like Scorpio is unfortunately not the sign of just enjoying life on the planet Earth, the Earth realm. That's really the opposite sign, Taurus. Taurus is really the sign of being the bull, the cow, like having a field of grass, having milk, you know, having resources and plenty, and, you know, keeping up with the Joneses and having a nice little neighborhood and a house like everybody else has, like the world sells you on, you know. Scorpio is not the sign of really having a lot of fun in the world. They're the sign that needs to check out of the world and get away from the world and go in a cave and meditate 8 hours a day. And so this is why they're a Brahmin sign or a moksha sign, because they have to transform and find God, or else life is just too painful without it. And so yeah, that's kind of a big arcing theme of Scorpio Navamsa. So it's kind of like when you have Scorpio Swamsha, you know right away this client is coming from a very a very vulnerable place of their, like this lack of nourishment, and they're needing to find that nourishment. And ultimately you want to encourage them to find it in the divine and in God, because it's not going to be easy to find it on the earth. That's the point of this Scorpio Swamsha, of knowing this. But they're also coming from like a very like need-centered kind of place, because of that sense of lack that they're experiencing. And so they kind of, the more mature ones and more evolved ones, you'll notice that they are already, even early on in life, realizing that they have to transcend these needs and transform these needs and become stronger psychically and spiritually and inwardly, and not be able to be moved by the whims of the world or the planets or the transits and whatever. And so this actually is what gets them into astrology often, or yoga or spirituality and things like this. And it's like they also do really well with this type of non-duality, like wisdom, any type of philosophy really, but they also can do very well with a like seeing everything as Vishnu type of philosophy that I've already explained throughout this course, that sort of Vaishnava philosophy, or even the idea of like self-inquiry, inquiring into everything and realizing my needs don't even matter. I am the self, basically deep spiritual practices at the end of the day. But transcending those needs and transforming them is kind of what the symbol of those serpents even symbolizes. Like serpents have to shed their skin and transform. And so this is really the sign of transformation and transmuting your weak, needy, vulnerable, emotionally frail weaknesses type of self, into a enlightened yogi, or a super being. And that's the other thing, is the moon is debilitated in Scorpio, which shows how this is just the least enjoyable sign for the average person to deal with. But if they can deal with this, they make great spiritual progress. So that's kind of the catch-22 of it. But if it's more afflicted, they get, basically, the old books would say they get bit by serpents, and that can happen in a real sense still today, but it's more likely that they get poisoned. They get bit by a serpent symbolically. They get poisoned by just the difficulty they experience in the world versus compared to other people, and it can also be classically getting poisoned by drugs and vices is very common for Scorpio Svamsa as well. And so yeah, on one hand you'll see Scorpios are like the most extreme, like demon people, who are just like obsessed with drugs and obsessed with like these vices and these things, just at a very extreme angle. And then you can have saints, you know what I mean, and like extremely enlightened saints, like so many have had Scorpio going on. Yeah, so it's also very common, if Scorpio is afflicted, if there's not some sort of danger from serpents or reptiles or creepy yucky things or spiders or whatever, then it can be water, like danger around water, drowning or almost drowning, or just having a difficult experience in water, fears of water even. Water symbolizes what, the unconscious mind, right? Because it's like what's beneath that water. And so Scorpio is the most likely, if it's afflicted, to have a bad experience with what's beneath the water, as an omen to tell them you've got to change. Like, you're not aware of what's beneath your water. You're not aware of what's in your unconscious mind. So then when you go to the beach, man of war stings you, wraps its leg around you. Like, one client I had a man of war wrap its leg around her thigh, like almost trying to get into her, and she was in a situation with a person, a relationship that she did not need to be in, and it was like a very clear omen of like, you need to be a lot more aware of what's going on under the surface in your romantic life, sort of. That was a really extreme example. But yeah, dealing with demons, basically like psychic disturbances, are the most common with Scorpio Svamsa. So these days, a lot of people act like, oh, like spirits or demons or this or that are affecting you or this or that. But if the person really does have Scorpio Svamsa and they're mentioning this, you need to really listen to them and really pay attention. And basically these people can be more vulnerable to the negative effects of like negative entities or spirits or ghosts or tramp souls, and I actually did a video on my YouTube channel on Scorpio and the supernatural. So I if you're curious about ghost stories, Scorpio is the most sensitive to the like the ghosts, the astral realm, the the hidden realm, you know? Um, there's a little ding confirming that. Um, so Scorpio can be the most vulnerable to the tramp souls and this and that, but at the same way they can be the most vulnerable to God and God coming in as well, because it's just really the star of getting tapping in other people's resources across the board, whether that's a demon or a deva, you know? So basically, yeah, planets that are in the Swampsha can give a great strength to that Scorpio Swampsha person. But if it's afflicted, like they'll still have great strengths, but have these demons oftentimes. So it's really interesting. But yeah, you'll find like, Sun in the Swampsha just as like a really, really, tough yogi that I know of who's like really successful and really made a lot of progress in his life. He just has the sun in his Swampsha as his sun in Scorpio as his Swampsha, for example. I think Yogananda had moon in the Swampsha as an example too of that. Yeah, you get really some of the most extreme people that are known through history that will have a Scorpio Swamsha as well. It's just one of these things that is really one of the most extreme Swamshas. And you'll notice he just says like one word for the opposite sign Taurus, but he says a number of words for this sutra. And again, it's very possible that there was a paper shortage at the time he wrote this in India, so he was using as little words as possible. So for him to add all these extra words, it is very, very significant. And so, yeah, like one of the classic examples that my teacher taught this gave was Paramhansa Yogananda, like I was saying, because he's just a perfect example of this Scorpio Swamsha. So I'm going to share this real quick and then we'll get back to explaining more of it. But you'll see in the Rashi chart, he's a Leo Lagna. Moon is in the Lagna. And it's the 12th Lord in the ascendant, and that makes a lot of sense for someone who spent so much time meditating to have the 12th Lord in the Lagna. And this moon is the Atmakaraka. So having the Atmakaraka in the first house makes one strong and mighty too. That's just something that we're going to come to when we go more into what Jaimini says about houses, but that's one of the things he says. So if your Atmakaraka is in the first house, you're going to be strong and mighty in some way, like Yogananda was, and especially if it's got good dignity. In here, it's in a friend sign. The moon is delighted by Leo, um, but it's not an unbelievable dignity. But anyways, okay, so then we look at the Navamsa chart. If I pull up the Navamsa Varga, remember we ignore the Lagna with Jaimini. We're looking for the Atmakaraka. It's the moon, and the moon falls in Scorpio. So he was a Scorpio Svamsa, or Scorpio karakamsa, as some might say. Um, then notice what is Rashi aspecting. Well, the only planet Rashi aspecting is Saturn, a very strong Saturn in Capricorn. So that also speaks to being a Swami or a renunciate or an ascetic because of having that very, very strong Saturn in Capricorn. Um, okay, so do others okay, so that was just quick seeing his chart just to kind of like get a quick refresher on how you do these techniques. Remember to use Rashi aspects, and yeah, you'll see so much in just a few moments with seeing these Swampsha techniques. So the other noteworthy thing with Yogananda was that his mother died when he was around 7, I believe. So he really did have a lack of breast milk or a lack of support from the mother. And that really like broke him. And that caused him to go deep into the spiritual life and find the divine mother because his real mother was gone. And his mother was like a spiritual devotee and a Kriya yogi and all this stuff as well. And then that galvanized him to basically, he meditated for more than a day straight in his tiny little attic in his house and things like that. So yeah, Yogananda is a great example of that. Um, the Yeah, so back to the Atra means, demons. Scorpio really is the sign of battling with our demons, and it is actually the sign of battles in general as well. So in the eighth house, like in a prajna, is the house of the battle going on. So people that are involved in battling are gonna have Scorpio come up a lot, whether that's even martial artists or military people or criminals or like rapists or like things like that even. Um, and this is this is why they need to be the most on guard, like snakes are. You see, snakes get such a bad rap, but snakes are really like wanting to be left alone most of the time, and they only need to expose, they only get seen because they're exposing themselves to the sun to stay warm, to digest their food. They would not even like to be out in the sun if they didn't have to do that. They would be hiding in their little holes and caves all the time. Yeah, so this is why they need to be on guard, basically. And this is where, Jupiter rules the fifth house for Scorpio. So Jupiter is so important for the Scorpio Lagna or people like that. It's really good to have a strong Jupiter because that's the wisdom that you're going to need as a Scorpio to really win the battles you need to win. And so the other two Brahmin signs, though, they are the more sattvic. They are of the sattva guna, Cancer and Pisces. It's really just Scorpio that is the tamas guna. So with that tamo guna quality, you basically are gonna have again, like these people need to wake up because they have to, because they can't do anything, they can't really survive any longer in the miserable place they're in. They have to find God to get out of their pain. You know how they talk about how yogis talk about if you search for God out of inspiration and just true inspiration, you'll stay with God the longest. But if you get onto the spiritual path just because it's like something fun to do and trendy, like with the Raja Skuna, you're just gonna leave when the next trend changes. Um, and then if you're getting into spirituality out of Tamasguna, the pain or the suffering in life, like, you just lost the love of your life or something and you can't think of anything else to do, that's still good to get on the spiritual path because of that. But then once you get healed and you're feeling better, you're gonna probably just go do something else. And so it's really only the sattvic people who, those that are marked by that sattvic guna who are going to search for God throughout their lives. You know what I mean? And who are going to be on the spiritual path just because it's what else is there to do, just because it just makes sense for Cancer and Pisces. For Scorpio, it's more like, no, it's just a need-based thing. Like I have to wake up because it's just too painful to live in this garbage life I'm living anymore. So that's the difference between Scorpio and Cancer and Pisces. Um, and again, very interesting that serpents is the word being used to refer to and not scorpions. But serpents have such more of an ancient symbolism in all cultures. And so all serpent symbolism is deeply related to Scorpio. So don't think of Scorpio as just a sign of scorpions. Think of it as the serpent sign. And serpents symbolize wisdom and magic and transformation and longevity. All of these are key words of Scorpio. A snake is gonna shed its old skin. A snake is really hard to kill. So that's why Scorpio is a sign of longevity and transformation, just shedding your old skin. And Scorpio is really the sign of the soul's course between its many lives. And so therefore it's the sign of the occult and therefore the sign of astrology. So you'll see astrologers will have Scorpio often in their chart. Um, and remember, this word he uses for serpents also means Vishnu, Sari Shripaha. I think I pronounced that wrong there, but either way, yeah, that word means Vishnu. So this transformation is something that is enlightening you. It's like seeing the serpent, or are you seeing God behind that and the whole bigger picture of it? And that's what astrology helps us do, is see the deeper meaning behind the demons and chaos of our lives. And so the need for seeing everything as Vishnu is very, very important, and that's the best remedy really for Scorpios, and that's where astrology comes in to show us the details and the math of like, oh, of course I lost the love of my life on this day because this transit happened. It was scheduled, and from the moment I first met her, it was a scheduled 30-year Saturn cycle or something, whatever, and you can just kind of see it all. And then you're almost just grateful and you make peace with it, but you stop seeing your life from that little needy ego mind moon like place, you know? Um, and that's the value of astrology. Um, and again, the serpents, of course, in a more simple sense that you're probably aware of, they symbolize the kundalini and the dormant spiritual potential of a person. And of course, yogis are associated with serpent symbolism. Shiva has the serpents coiled around his neck, indicating how he brought these serpents up. He brought that base level energy up and transmuted it into a higher refined energy. And again, as I explained in another video, serpents also symbolize like malice and anger, and a true yogi must transform their anger and their malice into bliss and peace and compassion. So that's really the process of what's going on at Scorpio when the Swamsha is in Scorpio. Um, and so yoga across the board is really big for Scorpios. And you can definitely always encourage a Scorpio Swamp to just go deep into yoga, like get initiated, get the real experience of it, not just some workout gym type thing, um, and see what happens. So yeah, like then you have the again the stanya hanisha, the abandonment of breast milk, the sense of feeling this. So yeah, this means a loss of breast milk, but this can also just mean a sense of feeling emotionally abandoned, or basically feeling abandoned by the mother. So basically, the mother not being around very much is very common for Scorpio Swampsha. Like the mother um, died during childbirth, one of those situations, or being adopted, or just like the mother is an alcoholic or was emotionally unavailable, or she was so traumatized that she wasn't able to be there for the person. This is all super common for Scorpio. And then again, even if it's like a really lucky saint like Scorpio, there's usually something difficult that happens with a mother that has to break their attachment early on. But then that's kind of a good thing because they don't create the same ego attachment patterns that normal people create. And that's part of why they become a saint later on. Think of all the saints you know and try to name it even five saints for me that of all the yoga masters, of all the saints of every culture, name at least five for me that have had perfect relationships with their parents and still like got along great with their parents at the end of their lives. We will have a hard time finding that. It is so much more easy to find cases of saints who, yeah, were orphaned or who were sick or who had horrible upbringing or difficulty with parents or problems with their parents. Joseph of Cupertino, the Italian saint, he was like sick growing up most of his life. Um, endless cases of it. So these are all your Scorpio people. So yeah, basically Scorpio is actually really the sign that is marked by a difficult childhood and a separation from the mother and a sense of a lack of nourishment, which could which has all kinds of different possibilities, like being an orphan or adopted or all kinds of things. Or just being like the least loved one of the family. You know what I mean? The black sheep of the family, the ugly duckling, these sorts of things. Um, And this can lead to that sort of emotional loss, that sense of separation, that sense of like lack of security and nourishment that the mother's milk and the breast milk of the mother symbolizes. So this is really the star of learning to transcend all those needs. Um, and yeah, basically like kind of see Vishnu in it all, see God in it all. And yeah, that's the thing is if it wasn't a Brahmin sign, it would be some other goal that it's got. But because it is a moksha sign, a Brahmin sign, the end goal is just enlightenment, at the end of the day. And another interesting thing is when you think of the snakes, snakes have no eyelids, like they have these little, like translucent things, but they don't have real eyelids. So they're never blinking or closing their eyes. So again, this sense of like always being on guard and always watching is really important for Scorpio Swamp. It's needed. Um, Scorpio is the sign of being in a crisis state, being in a chaos state. And so, like, if you have K2 in Scorpio, you'll notice people with K2 in Scorpio are like really good at handling crisis states, but they're like too intense a lot of the time. They're too on guard. People with Rahu in Scorpio are like, and they have K2 in Taurus, they're like, oh, life is flowery and lovely and Venusian. And then life smacks them. You know what I mean? And then they're like, oh my God, I need to be on guard more. I need to be on watch more. And so, um, Scorpio, like what's going on with Scorpio will reveal for you how the client handles chaos and handles crisis states. It's kind of like in the tarot cards, it's like the tower card where, you know what I mean? Or it's like having the rug pulled out from under you. That's really what the state of Scorpio is. And so that's why Scorpios need to be like always watching and, or at least appear that way, and be always protecting themselves and always being aware and alert at all times. Um, you know, like, like one of my teachers once was talking about this, how like, yeah, like Scorpios are the tough guys, like the bikers, the leather jacket, like Hell's Angels guys that will have the snakes. They'll oftentimes have a snake on their leather jacket, like "Don't tread on me," like that snake symbol. And that type of energy, like "Don't tread on me, don't mess with me," like "I've got a gun, I've got a weapon," or like martial artists, like Bruce Lee had a bunch of stuff in Scorpio. And if you didn't even know that Bruce Lee could fight, you could look at his eyes and his shifty eyes and like his quickness of his eyes and the way he moves, you would just know not to mess with him, if you ask me at least. Like even in his interviews and things, he just seems like, whoa, for how small, guy probably didn't weigh that much, but like, wow, he is intense and you want to watch out for him. So it's that kind of vibe that is Scorpio basically. And Scorpio again is like learning to be more alert and not get caught with its eyes closed, basically, and not get caught in a chaotic or a crisis state where it can't benefit from it. And what's cool is if Scorpio has like strong planets there, like Mars or Jupiter or something, or is aspected by good planets, then you'll see that these crisis states actually lead the person to a higher and higher place in life, actually. So like they go to war and they just get promoted, and then they just make a living out of it or whatever. Okay, so that's mostly all I wanted to share on Scorpio. Might be another few details, but then I'll give you guys a bunch of examples of this as well. Thank you.